Hey everyone, it's Irene here. Welcome to this live stream. If you're watching this right now, it's highly likely this is the recording. So you may be watching this on my YouTube channel, you might be watching this on my Facebook page. Thank you for being here. Thanks for pressing play after the fact. I know it can be a little more of an effort to come back to something after it has gone live. I actually just made a bit of an oops. Realized that I was talking in the wrong on the wrong page. So those of you that are on the recording, you won't know that. But we're gonna talk about a few things today. And normally on these weekly chats, I do Q&A. And I might have some time for some Q&A today, but I wanted to focus a little more intensively on our current time. So right now it is, what day is it? It's March 26th, 2020. And we're all in an interesting, as one of my girlfriends would say, we're in an interesting pickle right now. We're in an interesting time in our history where we have what's called a global pandemic going on. These have happened in the past. I think it's fascinating right now that we have this happening now when we have media, when we can all be connected versus, say, when the Spanish flu occurred, where people really didn't know what was going on. So we have an interesting benefit to having communication, as we can understand what's going on, we can take precautions, etc. I also know that because of what's occurring, everyone is going to be in very different situations. Depending on the country you're in, depending on your health level, depending on who you live with, whether you live with anyone, whether you're alone, whether you're used to being alone, whether you're used to not being alone. Everyone's going to have a different situation. So I cannot speak to each country in each city, but what I can speak to is our physiology, our body's physiology, our body's nervous system, how we need to, and this is super important, really important, so really listen to this, we need to stay connected to our bodies, our systems, and to the environment we're in. And this will test us in an interesting way. So I'm going to go into some practices, really basic practices. These are things that you can find on my site, and I will guide you to where those are on my site so that once you play with me today and feel some of these things I'm going to guide you through, you can go and download some of these basic exercises. Anyways, so thing that we have to understand, if we grew up in an environment that wasn't that safe, and I'm going to assume that there's a fair chunk of people who are interested in my work, learning with me, students in my programs, you're following me here. You're here because you know before the last few months occurred that you have had a nervous system that was a little frazzled, a little dysregulated, maybe a lot dysregulated. Maybe you know that you have got PTSD or complex PTSD or some form of a diagnosed mental illness, or maybe some form of chronic illness, which we know these things occur as a result typically of unhealed, unresolved early trauma, in utero trauma, transgenerational trauma, and if I even give one more little piece in there, we've seen past life traumatic events can sneak into our current lives. I actually wrote an article about that last year, I think. I'm always forgetting the times on the traumas that we don't think of as traumatic. So my assistant Crystal can pop that into the comments. If you're watching this live on YouTube, everything that I mention when I speak, whether it's a link or a resource, we're going to have it in the Show More section under the Show More section. So everything that I say will be underneath my video. So to wrap that back, for those of you coming in, hello, welcome. I'm going to be guiding you through some basic orienting body connection practices today, but I'm kind of laying a bit of a foundation. So if you're coming in a little later, when I'm done, I encourage you to go back and watch from the beginning. Hello to everybody coming in here right now live. Hello from Finland. Let me know where you're from. The article that I just mentioned that I couldn't quite remember the title, 9 Common Human Experiences That Can Be Traumatic but are often seen as not. So check that out afterwards. But okay, so here's the thing. Here's what occurs. When we have had this kind of early stress, early trauma, early environmental stress, and I'll name some. Let's say we had an environment that wasn't safe. Maybe there was abuse. Maybe there was just unsafety growing up. Perhaps we weren't allowed to express who we are, our emotions. Things as simple, and I say this with air quotes, as being told to go to our room when we are crying, when we're angry. These are all natural human emotions, and if we were brought up in such a situation where that wasn't allowed, a little person is going to start to shut down. They're going to store that emotion. They're not going to know how to be with those sensations. And typically that kind of environment doesn't just happen one day. Typically this is something that occurs over and over and over. It is insidious, and it becomes our rubric of how we grow up. And what occurs in such a situation is we develop a map of nervous system wiring that sees the world as constantly always dangerous. The classic way that people will say this when they were brought up in that kind of environment is, no one is to be trusted, the world is a dangerous place, and we're all going to die. Verbatim, that is what clients will say. They feel in their bodies as adults because of that early stress, that early trauma. No one is safe, no one is to be trusted, the world is a dangerous place, and we're all gonna die. That's a pretty extreme statement for our cellular physiology to be expressing. And so other instances where our physiology might have that map of wiring, and I want to speak to them because there'll be some folks that'll say, well, Irene, I actually had a really solid upbringing and I was allowed to cry and be angry, and mom and dad did like each other, and there wasn't mental illness in the family, there wasn't chronic illness in the family. And the reason why I mention those is when a child is brought up in a family system where there is a lot of illness, a lot of, let's say, addiction, a lot of strain in general, just human strain, that creates the little one to have to change who they are. They have to shift who they are to stay safe and stay in the family system, because when you're really little and young, and I've spoken to this a lot, and you have that family system that isn't safe, you have to change who you are to stay safe. But there's other instances where this cellular mapping occurs of the world is a dangerous place, we're all going to die, and that is if we, say, had some form of birth trauma. Maybe we were born prematurely and we had to be isolated in an incubator because we needed to be on a respirator to breathe. Maybe our lungs weren't fully developed. Maybe we just needed extra care. Maybe we had a defect when we were born. We had to go under surgery right away. Imagine such a wee little person having to go under surgery. That is very intense. And so those are some instances where we grow up and our entire world, and I'm pausing and slowing down with that right now, where the world is dangerous to that infant. In utero, if a little one is in mama's tummy growing and she is under supreme stress and her stress hormones are pumping out like 24/7 because maybe her environment isn't safe, she's let's just say an abusive relationship, maybe she doesn't like her work, maybe times are very stressful, times like these, for example, that little one will feel that chemical reaction over and over, and that growing fetus will start to see their world as a dangerous place, the in utero field. And then when they come out, often these little babies that come out will be coming out stressed, looking to fight, or their system will just be shut down because they've been exhausted by being bombarded by stressors. So that's another way in which we can be created in a sense with high levels of stress really early on. We also know through the research and science that when there has been past generational trauma, and we saw this and we've seen this in studies where people have studied Holocaust survivors who obviously survived, let's say, Holocaust time, World War II. They got out, they had their children, and their children were not born in Nazi occupied Germany. They were born, say, in America or somewhere safe, and yet they have these symptoms of stress, high levels of anxiety, and it's because we know through something called epigenetics that things can shift and pass through the genetics. So this all might sound like bad news, and it isn't, in that we know that as adults, when we've had this kind of early wiring, we can change it. We can heal. We can rewire the nervous system. This is what neuroplasticity is, the ability to change the way the system is wired. So if a person was brought up in this kind of milieu, let's say, where there's just this constant threat from all these various potentials, could be one of them, it could be a few of them. As an adult, it's important, at least I believe it is important, and that's the work I do, to reteach the person how to find safety again, to reteach the person how to connect to the body. Because when we're in times of intense stress, especially when we're little and old, we disconnect from the body, because what we're feeling, intense emotion, intense sensation, constrictions, numbness in the body because we're shutting down. When we don't have the ability to pay attention to that and we disconnect from it, it keeps us trapped in our stress cycle, keeps us trapped in our survival cycle. And with time, this is, as we know through the research, through the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, this is what creates chronic illness, mental illness, PTSD, post-traumatic stress, etc. So why am I giving you this preamble? And thank you for everyone popping in today, right now. Hello, hello. I'm giving you this preamble because when we have not healed that early stuff that I just talked about, and we're adults, when a stress comes in, our system is going to react in a bigger way to that stress because it's still working with the old survival stresses that are in the system. And so I give this example in my Healing Trauma video series. It's a 3-part series. I'm going to reiterate it quickly. If you haven't watched this 3-part training, it's 100% free on my site. We'll post it here and below in the comments. In that example, or in that video, there's an example. Video number 1, I talk about two people, person A, person B. They get into the exact same car accident. Bit of a stressor. It's not a fatal car accident. It's just a little fender bender. It's like a poof kind of thing. You kind of get shook a little bit. Person A walks away totally fine. Maybe a little bit of a sore neck, but actually no big deal. They walk away. The next day they have no trouble getting into their car. The next day they go along with life. Nothing changes other than they know intellectually, yeah, I had that car accident. That sucked. Life goes on. Person B, they get into this accident, exact same accident. They walk away a wreck. They walk away with phobia of getting in the car. They walk away being hyper alert or maybe shut down. And they walk away, and over time they start becoming chronically ill. They may develop some kind of mental anxiety around driving. They may not want to leave the house, for example. So why is it that one person versus the other experiences all these crazy symptoms and the person A doesn't? We think, we probably know based on the research, it's because of that early adversity, because of that early stress. So I talk about that a little more at length in that video. If you want some reading, the book Scared Sick is a very good book by Robin Carr-Moss. We can pop that down, but it talks about the influence of early stress on the physiology and on the adult later in life. So why I'm telling you this, we are going to get into some practice, I promise. I'm telling you this because if you're here again, chances are you're here because you know that you had an upbringing that wasn't the best. And even before this new strain of this coronavirus that is really potent right now, again, I want to remind everyone, this virus, we've had coronavirus for a long time. It's what we used to vaccinate dogs with when I worked in an animal hospital with my parents. This is just a very potent strain, right? So it's a very potent strain. That's why it's very contagious. It's very potent. And so currently we have this situation where there's a lot of threat going on in the world. And for those of us here who know that even before this pandemic occurred, that we're classifying it as right now, we wanted to heal our nervous systems because we knew that we had old stuff that was sitting inside because of maybe our physical illnesses, chronic illnesses, mental illnesses. Perhaps you have been diagnosed with PTSD. So it's very important, I believe, to have the education to understand, because of the current world crisis, because of a real threat that is out there. We're going to assume it's not in your home if you've taken the precautions that we're being taught by the health authorities. If it's not in our home, we are safe, and yet the system will not think that we are because of past experiences. And so it's so important at this point in time for your own immune system, for your own mental health, for the health of your system to continue to really connect to the system, connect to the body, connect to the real fear that might be existing in your system, and to work with it, to be with it, to stay with the body. I said the other day somewhere that if we disconnect from the chaos that's happening, we're going to disconnect from ourselves. But we need to be able to see the chaos from a very intellectual point of view and do as much as we can to keep our body from being swept into that cycle of chaos. Because when we do that, again, if we've had history of trauma and we're still working on healing that trauma, which most of us probably are, many of us are, it's almost like it's going to have a Velcro factor of 100, meaning it's going to be easy for us to stick to all of the energy and anxiety and fear and this kind of concept of the world is a dangerous place and we're all going to die. I said that a little while ago for those that are just coming in. That concept of saying the world is a dangerous place, we're all going to die, it's very common in folks who have unresolved early and developmental trauma. So right now, and this is kind of my important piece of education I want everyone to really understand. That was our history. It's going to be very easy for us to get more sucked into this than we need to be. So comes back down to staying up to date with what we need to know, listening to reputable health authorities, and doing as much as we can to feel what's going on in our systems. Let the movements express, let the emotions express, let the sensations come out. If we have kids, if we are carrying child, like you're a woman and you're pregnant, as I mentioned a second ago, when mama is stressed, little one inside is going to feel that stress. So this is where we want to do as much as we can to keep our systems connected, grounded, breathing, but also letting the emotions out. So let's get into some things. I want to get into some practice. And really the thing that I want to say, hey there from everyone, I'm just looking where everyone's from, is that we have got incredible resilience in our systems. And this higher brain of ours can either be a hindrance or a help. In other words, it will hinder us if we loop into more than we need to. This is what psychosomatic means. A psychosomatic illness, a psychosomatic symptom is where we use our mind and our psyche and our thinking to get wrapped up into something. I've been calling this a survival spin cycle, and we loop awfulizing in our head. We loop the what ifs too much, and what occurs is that can create the system it can create symptoms in the system. It will depress our immune system. It will shift our gut health. It will shift the flow of our blood, our circulation. So the mind can hinder our health if we're not careful. The mind can also help our health if we use it the way we would talk to a child that's freaking out, right? The way we would talk to an animal that's scared, the way we would talk to someone who just hurt themselves on the side of the street. We would talk to them with calmness, connection, groundedness, engagement, right? And I talked to my students about this a few days ago, or just 2 days ago on our training call, is how can you talk to yourself in a way that you would want a really awesome doctor or nurse or friend to talk to you when you were in times of stress, right? This idea of having a really good bedside manner. I think most of us have heard that term. Give yourself right now a really good bedside manner. This is where, in other words, you will talk to yourself. You will say, if you're finding yourself spinning in everything that's going on right now, the media, the almost obsessive compulsive practices I'm seeing a lot of people talk about on the internet about how to stay safe. It's almost going so far that it's making us more worried. So how can you go through some of the practices that we're having to do, taking care of our hands, washing our hands, etc., but with calmness, with connection, with pleasure, with joy, as opposed to doing it with a fear and a threat because you're doing it. So doing it mindfully, but in a way that is soft and gentle, the way you would help wash a child's hand if they needed help washing their hands, for example. So one of the things that we want to do, so I'm going to sort of split into working with our bodies right now, is to commit and to connect, I should say, to connect to something that is under you. And by that I mean, and for those of you that have been with me for a long time, you'll know exactly what I mean. For those of you who are new here, can you feel the ground under you? Can you sense what is under you? Can you sense the weight of your body being supported by, in this case, I'm sitting on a kitchen chair right now. It's got a little bit of a back. Can you just take a second and drop into whatever it is that you're on, even if you're standing right now, to feel your 2 feet being supported by the ground under you, by the ground under you. So take a second and do that. And actually, as you're doing that, say out loud, actually talk out loud and say, I'm feeling the chair under me, or I'm feeling the couch under me, or I'm feeling the ground touching my feet. I'm feeling my feet touching the ground. And play with that. And if there's a part of your brain that's like, I'm not going to say that out loud, that's ridiculous. That's child's play. Humor me and say it out loud. Granted, it's safe to do so. You're somewhere that you can do that. So really say those words and say them. It doesn't have to be repetitive, but just enough to really feel the voice, feel the breath, and honor, like, yep, I'm sitting on this chair, not falling over. Here I am. So number 1 is being able to connect to the ground under. And this is something that isn't rocket science, and yet when we are in a survival spin cycle, whether in our head, in our mind, or in our nervous system, or in our physiology, it can be a very simple way to just drop. And I prefer this than asking someone to get grounded. The reason why is grounding is kind of this more esoteric piece. And if the skill isn't there to really feel energy and the connection to earth in the way that we would in practices where we say get grounded, it sometimes helps to just be a little simpler and be like, I'm sitting on a chair, I feel it under my butt, I feel my thighs, I feel my feet, here I am, etc. Maybe you can let yourself, if you've got something to lean against, lean back and let that support your spine. So give that a go. And I'm curious, for those of you who have been sitting here and listening to me yak and babble a little bit, as you did that, as you said out loud these things, as you felt the ground under you, Did you notice anything? Did you notice something that you were surprised by? Did you notice a shift in your focus of where your mind was? So as I wait for some comments to come in, I'll bring you to the next piece. Reminding us again that the reason why it's important to stay connected to the ground, to where we are, is when we get into survival mode, or when we put ourselves into more survival mode, we disconnect from where we are. We disconnect from the body. So it's very, very important to find ways to reconnect to the environment in these simple ways. The second thing I'll guide you through is so we're feeling the ground under, we're feeling maybe our feet on the floor. Can you notice where your eyes are looking? Just notice, and they might be looking at the screen because I'm talking and your attention is on myself, what I'm doing, what I'm saying. But let your eyes see if your eyes want to go somewhere. Can you let them wander? Can you let them be curious with what's around you? Perhaps they actually want to look at me, and that's fine. Perhaps you want to look at something in my background. I've got some plants and some candle holders, and I've got this reddish shirt on, and got every now and again I bring my mug up because my hands are freezing cold and this is warm, right? So allow your eyes to see. The fancy word we would call this is orient. And let it happen without planning where you're going to look. Can you feel any spontaneous impulse to see, to look? We would call this exploratory orienting, to look, to see around. Doesn't need to be far. It could be somewhere as close as that hot cup of tea that you might have next to you. It could be the clock that's on your desk. It could be the clouds and the rain that's falling, and here at least it's raining now. So to just be, it's not, and there's no right or wrong, and watch if that mind is questioning all of this. Is the mind wondering, am I doing this right? Does she mean this? Does she mean that? Typically when our minds go into that kind of self-talk, that is a sign that we did have unsafety growing up. Any type of self-deprecating thought, typically self-harming thought, questioning our natural impulse to do something. When we question it and scrutinize it and wonder, am I doing this right, wrong? And I'll see this on my students, they'll give themselves wrinkles because they're frowning, they're concentrating, they're asking themselves, right, wrong, I don't know, should I be doing this? Usually, typically, if not always, that is a sign that somehow in our lives we were never fully trusted. We were never allowed to trust what we wanted. We were never allowed to really be who we are. And so just to watch that. And like I said a moment ago, can you listen to the mind talk, and can you listen to how you might have dialogue with yourself? And can you shift that dialogue to be that really good bedside manner I mentioned a second ago? So if you had really good bedside manner with yourself, how would you speak to yourself as you explored this? So we're working with two things. So the first thing I had everybody to sense, to feel, is the ground, something under them. It might, maybe you are on the ground, maybe you're sitting on the floor. Maybe you're on a bed, maybe you're on a couch, maybe you're standing up. Heck, maybe you're driving a car, right? We can do this while we're driving, feeling the seat, the bucket under us. So I have a few comments in here. Thanks from everyone who's mentioning what they felt. So this is from when I asked, what did you notice when you sensed the ground, the surface, and you spoke out loud? I feel my bum on the couch. I feel my feet on the floor. Maybe if you're lying down, I feel my back and my head on the rug or on the yoga mat or whatever it is you might be. So Tricia said, my breath changed. It was calming. One person said it really helped me to stay here Yes, this is the point. It really allows us to feel where we are in the present moment. Someone said calming allowed me to be present. Someone said it helps me if I don't close my eyes. Definitely. So here's the other thing. Notice how I never asked anyone, close your eyes. For someone who grew up, for someone who grew up in that scenario I mentioned about 15 minutes or so ago, or 10 minutes ago, and the scenario was where we grow up in an environment where we're constantly under threat, it's dangerous. This instills a level of terror in a human being. And so if we know that we were brought up that way, the last thing I would ever want one of those people to do is to close their eyes unless they feel safe to do so. This is why these practices, meditation practices, when they say close your eyes and take a deep breath, it's missing a whole other section before then. And yesterday when I put out the notice that said I was doing this chat today with you guys, I had a curiosity, and the curiosity was, are your regular meditation and self-care practices not cutting it right now? And the reason I said that is because if we have got unresolved early trauma and developmental trauma, in the current time that we're in right now, this is going to poke at those wounds like no one's business. And it's important to understand that, and understand that the heightened anxiety, part of it, yes, might be what's occurring in our current world, but a big portion of it is going to be that unresolved stuff. And I know that from my own experience. I know that from hearing my students who have been saying, those that have been doing this work longer, that they're surprised that they're not as anxious as they thought they should be. They're not as anxious as other people that they're seeing, and it's because they've done the work to stay connected, and they've done a lot of the work to heal these old traumas and to work with things. So eyes can be opened or closed. You have to do what works with you, for you. Someone said, I notice my thighs feel very heavy on the chair. I'm aching, and my feet feel very light and almost as if they're hovering over the floor rather than resting on it as they are. Yeah, so to notice that, to feel that, and knowing that you can shift. This is not a sitting meditation where you have to stay 100% still. You can move, you can stretch. If you feel a desire to stand up, by all means, stand up. If you feel a desire to run on the spot, do that. If you feel a desire to lay down and just let your body be supported by the floor, let your system do that. Someone said seconds after I started to yawn. Yeah, so yawning is a sign that the system is going into a bit of a relaxation phase, typically. Okay, so 2 things we played with. Let's review them. Saying out loud, I'm on my chair, I feel my feet. And then after that, do you remember the second thing? It was to let the eyes wander and see. Let the eyes wander. I almost said let the wander eyes. Let the eyes wander and see what's interesting. And when you do that, really allow the head to move freely. And explore. And you could explore with your vision. If for some reason your eyes feel better closed, you can still explore with your senses, right? With sound. People who don't have sight can still sense the environment around them. Their sense of spatial awareness, sound, smell, wind is much heightened in someone who doesn't have the ability to see with their eyes. So if you can see with your eyes, of course, be grateful for your vision and let your vision really see. Now, if someone is feeling, and I saw a comment, that going into the body feels unsafe, again, this is very common when we haven't practiced being with the body. And if we grew up again in situations that were unsafe and we were not allowed to sense ourselves, to sense emotion, going into the body can be absolutely terrifying. So if that is the case, stay with things on the external. And we'll add another little piece in here to see if being with the body can be a little easier. So this makes sense. The body feels not safe. That's accurate. So it's accurate. But can you have connection with a little bit of something on the external? Okay. So now, bring attention to your hands. So find out where your hands are. I know where mine are. Just have a look at them and see them. Depending on your vision, you might need to have your hands further away, maybe close. Find somewhere where you can look at your hands and your eyes are not straining. And just feel their temperature. Mine are cold right now, so I'm going to say, yep, mine are a little chilly. But feel them. Are they warm? Are they even in your awareness? Can you feel them? Can you sense them? We've been putting so much emphasis on keeping our hands clean the last little while that we may have not even stopped to feel them when we wash them. So just let your hands rub a little bit. Let them curve. Let them move. Let them interlace the fingers in different ways. Feel the thumbs, the fingers. Warm them up if you have to. So just feel how they feel. Feel the skin. Maybe even thank your skin for being a very intelligent barrier, right? Our skin keeps us safe from the external world, right? It keeps us safe. It's a barrier. And with these hands, you can keep feeling them. You can let them rest. So again, give you permission to, if you're really enjoying feeling them, you can bring up to your forearms, or if you need to let your hands rest, you can let them just dangle and hang or lay on your lap. But can you notice your hands, and can you also notice the breath? So I'm going to bring in one more piece here. Can you just notice the breath and what your breath is doing as you notice your hands? Just little bits of noticing. And if, again, at any point in time, if you need to pause, chill out, stop paying attention at this level, listen to that and do that. If you have not paid attention in this way to your body ever, it might surprise you how difficult it can be to notice the ground under while noticing maybe the hands and also noticing the breath. So piece this together in little tiny bits. It might be that you have to pause and you just go back to feeling the ground under your bum. It might be that looking around and seeing the environment for you feels a little easier. It might be that holding and sensing the hands actually is very pleasant, or it might not be. So again, I'm giving you these options, different ways to connect to the body, to connect to what is around. And the last thing I just mentioned was to connect to the breath, to feel the breath, to notice what the breath is doing. And as much as possible, honor what the breath wants to do. So if the breath wants to be shallow, let it be shallow. If it wants to sigh a little bit, let it sigh. Have you sighed lately? Right now is a good time to let sighs out, to maybe let some frustration out through the breath. It might be that there needs to be something that gets out in a form of a growl or or something. We need to feel what the body wants and allow it to have that occur. And what I mentioned a second ago, and someone made a great comment here, so I'll read it to back up what I'm about to say. Someone said, it's powerful to me what you said. If I question if I'm doing something wrong, could it be a sign we couldn't trust what I was thinking or couldn't be who I was when I was younger? Absolutely. We aren't born into this world questioning our, if you think about a baby, when a baby passes gas or a baby cries or a baby pees, they don't ask themselves the question, is this okay? But very quickly they learn whether it is or isn't on how they're treated when that occurs. And so our interactions with our primary caregivers, the interaction we had with other people, with our bodily impulses, will determine whether or not we honor and trust our own bodies. And so when I say, what does the breath want to do? Does it want to sigh? Does it want to let out a sound? What does it want to do? There might be, again, that little voice in the head saying, I can't do that, or I actually want to do this, but that would be wrong, or that's not right. I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't growl. I shouldn't bare my teeth. I shouldn't squeeze my fists and say enough. Like all these actions that we see humans do, humans who are expressive and just let things out, it can be very common for us, if we weren't allowed to do these things when we were young, to let them out. I mean, right now, if we think about the cultures in the world that are super expressive and talk with their hands, and they have so much energy and exuberance and fire, right? Very much Latin cultures are like that. If you could adopt some of that energy, what would want to come out? So I'm going to reel it back and just come back to these basics again. So as I've been talking, have you been able to maintain connection to the ground under you? So I'll ask that question and just check in with yourself and maybe let me know in the comments. Has there been a disconnection from feeling that ground, or have you been able to maintain it even with my speaking, even with you maybe exploring the hands, maybe exploring the world around you? Could you stay connected to the surface under you? Second thing was to allow the eyes to explore. And the reason why we want to practice that a little bit, to let the eyes explore, is so that we can actually see that we are safe. Now again, if our history says otherwise, if our cellular physiology has been wired to look for danger, it's possible that when you look and you see the environment, there may be alarm bells that come up that say, no way, nothing in this place is safe. And that's okay. It's important to notice that, but is it possible to find something that is a little more safe? And it could be something as simple as the pen that's sitting on your desk. It doesn't have to be something extravagant. It's about breaking through the system to explore and see something that is quite neutral, like this pen. So, not rocket science, and yet neurologically, if we've been designed to see everything around us as dangerous, we have to start to differentiate. That's the kind of the fancy word. Differentiate. That is this is this. And sometimes it helps to just name. Remember how I had you name what you were sitting on to feel what you were on? It sometimes helps to actually name things like, this is a pen. This is my glass of water. That's the sky over there. That's the bamboo on my porch, etc., etc. And by naming, by speaking, it actually helps our breath regulate a little bit more, because when we speak, we have to breathe, right? And so part of this sort of trick of naming things and talking out loud, of course, with that good bedside manner I mentioned, is that it brings a bit more ease to our breath. Okay, so I asked you all the question, were you able to stay connected to the ground while I was talking about other things and having you explore. One person said yes, one person said only remembered when you mentioned it again. Yep, that's very common. Let's see here. Someone's becoming very sleepy. So allow that to be felt. Sleepy can be a sign that we're just feeling our general fatigue. If we've been revving, high, and many people are right now, it is so important to come down and let the adrenal glands pause. Let them stop pumping out chemicals, because when they pump out chemicals to look for that danger and threat when it might not actually be here in your home, in your apartment, wherever you're living, we're wasting survival stress energy. We want to make sure that we can bring this chemical response down so that our system isn't hurting itself. I actually did a series of articles quite a few years ago. There's 3 of them. Crystal, you might be able to find them. It's a 3-part series on how to stop scaring ourselves and why it's important to stop scaring ourselves. And I talk a little bit about cortisol, the cortisol reaction within the stress hormones. So if we've been going long, and let's be very honest, our whole world has been going since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. We've just been pushing, and there's an interesting thought right now with things that are slowing down, things are shutting down, that this is like a whole massive global reset. It's reteaching us how to slow down, how to stay home and nurture ourselves and take care of what's most important, which is our systems, our personal systems, and if we have a family system, kids, etc., them. The most important things we're really having to tend to right now. One person said, my attention can only be on one thing, so either my body or my breathing or what I'm seeing or what I'm saying. So this again is a very common thing. With practice, we start to be able to do what I call multitasking our awareness, and that's what we want to aim for. It takes practice, it takes time. The reason why is it keeps us safe, right? We want to be able to walk down a street or drive a car and feel our bodies, know where our bodies are, but also see what's around us, and keep breathing, right? It's this constant recycling of our awareness. Okay. Great, we just popped those articles, one of the articles up. The others will come. So, to review, this need to stay connected to the ground under is one way to stay connected to the here and now. And again, when things are happening in our world that are very intense, and not just now, but this is also in the past, we have a tendency to disconnect from where we are. So we want to reconnect our system to where we are. Simple as I'm on my chair, I'm on my sofa, I'm on my couch. Second thing, to loop in this ability to see, to look. Where am I? Here I am. I see this. I see that. Oh, that's there, etc., etc. This is the practice of exploratory orienting. We'll pop up a video that I did about a year or so ago, less than a year, on the 2 types of orienting. One is exploratory, one is defensive. We want to try to shift our orienting to more exploratory. If our history is always being on defense, it'll be very common for us to feel defense and fear when we start to see the world. And with practice, with time, we can start to shift that wiring, that pattern, so that what we see is more exploratory, more curious. If you step out onto a porch, if you go to the window, if you can still go for a walk outside, at least we can here where I live, beaches, parks, see the birds, hear the wind, feel the rain, look at trees, look at houses, look at people. Of course, we're far away from people, but we can still smile and nod. I must say, I have never smiled and nodded to so many people in my hometown city ever in my life than in the last 2 weeks. It is amazing how currently we are connecting to people more, even though we're distant, but we're connecting more. It is so interesting to me. So use this opportunity to see how you can naturally orient, whether you're in your home, on a deck, at the window, or outside on a walk. Second thing I brought you to pay attention to were the hands. So these hands of ours that we have been putting so much focus on, but to be soft with them, to be easy with them. Every time you put your hands under water and soap and feel them, let it be an exercise of pleasure. Let it be an exercise of self-care. Feel how you can breathe. Feel how you can feel the feet on the ground as you wash the hands. If you have the fortune of having hot water come out of your taps, not many people in the world do, but if you do, be grateful for that warmth. Be grateful for the suds and the slipperiness. So find ways to bring the hands into your awareness while noticing the breath, while feeling the ground under you. Yeah, 2 people have said, yes, so true. You found that you've been connecting with more people. It's true. It's interesting. So I like to find these little nuggets of what we are being taught, even though there's what we would call a crisis going on. If you are safe in your home, and or if you are recovering from something right now, whether it is the current virus that is becoming epidemic, or it's just the general cold that you might have, or maybe here in Vancouver all the cherry blossoms are out, so everyone's sneezing and sniffling who has seasonal allergies. Whatever it is your system is doing and being with, can you see what is good? Can you see and feel what is simple, what is benign, what is neutral, and really use that as a practice? The second thing, or not the second thing, the fourth thing that I wanted to show you, and again, I've got a video on this. So there are 2 audios that I will link here. One is called 4 Simple Steps to, I always forget the title, 4 Simple Steps to Calm Overwhelming Emotions and Sensations. I created this audio well over 3 years ago. So I created it because we've always needed this. We've always needed steps and teachings to bring ourselves down, to calm overwhelm, to be in our sensations and not disconnect from them. So this is an ebook and a guide that I have. We'll pop it in the comments here. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, it'll be in the Show More section. But that is an audio exercise that you can do after this to practice. There's another lesson called the 15-minute neurosensory exercise. If you've done the healing trauma video series with me, you would have already done this, but we'll pop it up here regardless so that you can practice and use that as a tool to guide you. If it's hard for you to do these steps on your own, take advantage of those free guides, use them, put them in, play. The third thing I'm going to mention, and we do have a video on this, it's an older video of mine. It's called DIY medicine, so do-it-yourself medicine. It's an Eastern practice of learning how to contain the body. So I'm going to show you guys that now in a moment. But if you want another version of it, we'll pop that in the comments. It's an older video. I don't have any gray hair back then, so I'm a little younger, but the premises are the same. So it's a practice that I learned through Peter Levine, founder of Somatic Experiencing. And some people call it hugging our body. I like to call it a self-hold, And it can be done in a few ways. And the purpose of it is to really feel the body, contain the body. And when we are looping into more stress than we need to be, if we're finding ourselves starting to get a little floaty and a little disconnected and a little dissociated, this is again where you need to take your higher brain, notice it, and go, oh, I'm floating off into the ether right now. I better stay connected. And if feeling the ground under isn't enough, if orienting maybe is not helping, sometimes it helps to bring the hands and contain. One of the ways that Peter teaches it, and I'll show you that first, is you take your right hand, you put it under kind of the armpit, somewhere around here. For the women, you might be on a bit of the breast tissue, but it's kind of under the armpit by the heart, the side of the heart. Then you take the other hand, the left hand, you put it on the shoulder. Don't catch your hair though. There you go. And so it's like this holding position. And you wait. Depending on the length of your arms, you might need to go a little smaller. So again, it depends on where your arm length is, but one under, the other over. Now, for some of us, this is again why this work is not linear. This is going to feel wonderful. You might find that you take a deep breath and relax, and it really helps to contain yourself and bring yourself down to the ground. And maybe once you do this, you're like, whoa, I can actually feel and I can look and I can see. So again, you'll have to experiment with this. For some folks, when this happens, it actually might have the opposite effect, right? This is why our nervous systems are so complex and unique. For some, this might feel claustrophobic. It might feel too restraining, too constricting, especially if we've had histories of medical trauma or trauma where we've been pinned down or held down. This actually might feel terrifying. So just giving you these two scenarios, that there's no right or wrong way to feel this. It's just to notice what happens. If this is too much, and for those of you where this feels good, do this as long as you want. You can switch the arms. Either way is fine. But you could also bring the hands to the elbows. So I'm showing you with my arms up just so that you can see, but then you bring them down so that you're not holding them up and doing a shoulder workout. So you bring them down and you just feel that. For some of you, that actually might feel a bit better. For me, because I'm talking, this is a lot easier than this because this is constricting my lungs, so I can't speak to you right now. So right now, for me, this feels lovely. For some, that might also be too much. You can then bring the hands here so that it's more the forearms or even the wrists. And if we want to get really simple, it can be as simple as just the hands. Even just bringing the hands together and feeling them and focusing on pressure and breath and the ground under you can be enough to help contain the body, to bring it so that you can feel here is where I am. Could even bring them here so it's more of a containment to the heart. So what I'm showing you now, this isn't some secret 4-step process necessarily. This isn't a hand dance or a sequence that I learned, through the masters. This is just me showing you ways that you can use your own body parts. It could be here, it could be here. Even bringing the hands to the face can be very containing. Bringing the hands, you can't see my thighs, but I have them right here. Bringing the hands to the thighs and feeling the thighs, rubbing the thighs. I said this a little while ago. I'm not sure if it was in a Q&A with my students or here, but rubbing the thighs is actually a self-soothing mechanism that we do spontaneously, often without knowing it. If someone's nervous, what do they start to do sometimes? They'll rub their thighs, they'll move their hands like this. This is a way in which we naturally contain and stay connected to ourselves. So there's nothing wrong with consciously doing that as a way to feel where you are. And again, it doesn't just have to be the thighs. It could be the belly, it could be the chest, it could be the arms, it could be the head, it could be the calves, it could be the feet. Any part of your body that you feel a desire to connect with and touch, this is a wonderful time to practice that. Again, the reason why it's so important that we stay connected to our body is so that we stay connected to the here and now, and we allow ourselves to feel more that is going inside. So emotions, whatever emotions might be coming up and out through your system right now, very important to honor them, very important to let them move. Whether it's sadness, whether there's tears, for many people it might be frustration, it might be anger, it might be wanting to scream. There's no right or wrong. The one thing I will say, and I'll remind everyone, can you still feel the ground under you? Have you let go of that connection while we were doing this? So just check in and see, oh yeah, there's my bum. There's the space around me. If we have kids, and people have been asking me a lot of questions about kiddos, it's really important to let your emotions and your frustrations, angers, if you need to have a really big cry session, to do that privately. There's nothing wrong with a child seeing a few tears of what we would call nutritive sadness. So I actually did a video on 2 types of sadness. Crystal can pop that up. It was from last summer, I think. Nothing wrong with a little one seeing a tear or 2. But this comes back to what I said at the very beginning, so this is a good way for me to wrap this up. For those of us that were brought up in environments where mom and dad weren't mentally stable, maybe we weren't allowed to express, or maybe we saw mom or dad with their emotions flying all over. Typically it's usually stereotyped as the dad is the one who's angry, the mom's the one that cries, but we know that that's not always the case. I've had many clients whose mothers were venomous and mean as crazy. So it goes both sexes. But for us right now, if we have little ones, we have an opportunity to stop that cycle. So if we have got frustrations, angers because of the current situation, maybe it's an employment piece, a financial piece, just a downright I'm scared and I don't know what to do piece, process that stuff in private. When little ones see us in that level of pain and anxiety and uncertainty, they will get more worried. And what's going to happen is they are going to try to help us and try to make us better. They'll try to help us feel better, and that's not their job. So like I said, it is okay to show a little emotion that is what we would call nutritive. So a sadness that is a sadness of relief, of letting something go. But sadness that is in a spiral where we're in a really big funk, the little one sees that, they're going to think there's something wrong with them. They're going to think there's something wrong in general. And while there might be this situation we're in that is pretty big and it's a bit of a crisis, we need to help protect them a little bit right now. It's not their fault. It's no one's fault right now that we're in this. And it's important that they have regulation, connection, support. Go back to that idea of bedside manner. We want to make sure that we stay calm for our children, especially if we are carrying an unborn child right now. We need to stay calm. So go somewhere that you can process. If you have a garage, if you have a car that you can drive around in, if you can go out into the park or go for a walk and growl, shake your fists, cry, if this is something you need to do. I want to make that very clear. This is something you know you need to do, and you've been either holding it in or this has been coming out in ways that aren't helpful for your kiddos, if you have kiddos, or even your partner, or even your pets, right? Find ways to responsibly get the emotions out so we're not doing more harm to others and disrupting our relationships. Super important. So emotions are important. We need to get them out. Everyone's going to be in charge of their own emotions and how they do this. Practicing staying connected with the body is going to help that, because if we're not connected to the body, we cannot process our emotions. Emotions are sensations. They start as sensations in the body. It's the brain that interprets them as sadness, anger, etc., etc. So being with our body, staying with our sensations is super, super, super important. And the kids need to come out of this healthy, right? And so do we. And so just be very mindful of that. Be very, very mindful. There is a great article that my husband wrote. Someone asked about anger. Anger is an interesting one because if our bodies do not have the capacity to release anger, we need to be careful with anger because we need to make sure that we have the capacity to let that out. So my husband, Seth Lyon, wrote an article, How to Unfrustrate Frustration, and he talks about getting a towel that's wrapped up like a bath towel and squeezing it. I have this handy thing here. It's called a TheraBand. What this is, it's just something that's used in physical therapy for people who have had hand injuries to squeeze and to use as an exercise tool. But it is a very good way. It's a very good piece of plastic. It's like a really thick piece of plastic, and you can twist it. And it's almost like mimicking this idea of, wringing out someone's neck, getting our frustrations out. And so right now, that's another thing that's important, is if the current situation we're in means that we're maybe with our children more, they're driving us crazy, we want to maybe, do things that we've never thought of doing to them, which is good to catch ourselves, is to get something like this, get a towel and just squeeze, make sound, growl. But again, do this where you are in private. Maybe you have a partner, you can do this with them, but let the kids be kids. If the kids are feeling frustrated and angry, then be animals with them. Get down on the ground. It depends on their age. Be lions, be cats, be tigers, be bears. Get into the body. Find ways for them to move their bodies so they can get the emotion out. So for the question about anger, definitely check out his article on that. The release of anger, again, as I said, has to be done in a slow way. I don't mean slow necessarily, because if we have frustration, we might need to get it out really quickly. But I'm going to go back to what I said a second ago, or at the very beginning of this chat. We need to stay connected. If we just release anger and blow a top off of our head and get it super steamy and get it all out in this big burst of rage, but if we're not staying connected to the ground under us, if we're not able to know where we are, if we're not able to feel our breath, we run the risk of that anger being released in a way that is not helpful. It doesn't integrate. So this is why I always go back to these basics. Can you feel the ground under you? Do you know where you are? Can you sense your breath? Okay, there it is. And so when you're going into these emotional releases, if we are not connected to those pieces, there's a very big probability that that emotion, that anger, sadness that gets released, I hate to say it hasn't been released right. That's not the way I want to say it, but it won't integrate and it won't fully get out of the system. So very important. There's a reason why I always go back to those basics. Start with the basics and know that you have to stay connected to the body. Otherwise, it becomes what's called a cathartic practice. It's just crying for the sake of crying, getting angry for the sake of getting angry. If we're not connected to the body, it's not going to resolve and integrate. This is why people will fall into deep depressions of doing nothing but crying and crying for weeks and years on end for some people, because they're not connecting to the body. It's just an expression. It's a cathartic expression. So it's very important to reconnect to this body. There's a reason why in my programs with my students, we spend weeks and weeks and weeks before we even get to working with anger, because I have to make sure they know how to be in their bodies first, even when there's intensity. Because again, in the past, if we've had this early childhood that wasn't the best, when intensity came on board, we disconnected. And so as adults, with the intensity we're feeling now, we have to reconnect to the body first so that we can properly get this out. There is massive opportunity right now, currently, with this threat that's happening in the world, to heal trauma from our early years when we grew up in an environment that was under threat. If we were under threat growing up, we couldn't be given a more appropriate way to work with these old wounds. So if you can find a way to shift the way that we see this, to flip this a little bit, to still stay safe and practice what we need to practice to stay well, but to see how this could be an opportunity, a really, really opportunistic time to feel these terrors and fears and work with what's coming up in our system. Because if we are safe in our home and we know we're not unwell or sick, we're okay. We really are okay. But if we're feeling this excessive terror and excessive stress when we really are okay in our home, there's a very high probability that it is because of the old unresolved stuff from long, long ago. And why not use this as an opportunity to heal those wounds so that when we come out of this, we'll all be a little more regulated. I think it's a really good opportunity to play with that. This green one, it's green. They're colors. Someone asked, is that light or medium? I don't think this is light. I think this is medium, but if you go on Amazon, you'll see the different colors. Green is medium, I think. I have fairly small hands. The one above that's a bit bigger is blue. That's the one thing I know. I don't have those anymore, but go by the color. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to call it quits for today. And we've linked a lot of other resources. As I mentioned, if you haven't downloaded any of my pieces from my website, go to my website. There is an entire list of free resources. Check out the 4 Simple Steps to Calm Overwhelming Sensations and Emotions. It's an audio exercise with the reminders of what I just talked about. There's a 15-minute neurosensory exercise. Again, I talk you through the basics, and there's a whole bunch of other ebooks there. There's a healing trauma training you can check out. And if you would like to do a little more intensive work with me, I've always got my online program. Currently, the one that you can start is called the 21-Day Nervous System Tune-Up. It's a self-study course, and it is education and more practical exercises and support from my team through our Facebook group. So that is a paid product, but it is all on my site. So check out what you feel drawn to. And I cannot say this enough. As weird as it is, we have an opportunity right now with the current situation to really heal some deep wounds. And why not use this as that time to do that? We're being presented with it, so why not focus on how we can heal, how we can stay safe, how we can connect to our body, as opposed to being wrapped into the stuff that isn't going to help us right now. Right now, it really sounds like we just have to wait this out a little bit, stay calm, stay regulated, take care of ourselves, take care of those around us, be kind to people, even people we may not like. Every human right now is impacted by this. So we are all the same right now. And it's very important to understand that we all have a nervous system that works exactly the same. So let's work on our nervous systems. I'm going to end with a quote from Peter Levine, one of my mentors, founder of Somatic Experiencing. He has said many, many times that true human enlightenment will only occur when every single human being on the planet has a regulated nervous system. And right now, every single human being, at least who's connected to the media world and to internet and telephone and radio, is being impacted by what you are being impacted by I am being impacted by. We're all being impacted in the same way, which also means we have an opportunity to learn more regulation. And so perhaps this is this time that we become a little more enlightened and work on our nervous system and regulating it the best we can. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all your comments. You are so welcome. Again, this is being recorded. If you're here live, we'll post this up on YouTube. Take advantage of the resources. Fill your minds with goodness and with things that you can use and do to heal and stay contained and stay connected. Much love to everybody, and we'll talk to you in another week when I do another Q&A. We'll do a more formal Q&A next Thursday. All right, bye for now, everybody.